Hey, we are here today to talk about networking events and conferences and conversations with people and how to really think about how we show up and how we make the biggest impact with the people that we meet at these events. How do we show up confidently? How do we build better relationships and better connections? I'm so excited about this episode. So much energy from Brendan, who is my guest, and just such a great mindset reframe for how we can show up. So, for those of you who are thinking, terrible at networking events, I'm terrible at public speaking, I don't have success at these events, I think this episode is really going to give you a new way to think about how this works for you in your business. And I promise you, it's not what you think. And it is a little bit of a mindset shift, but nothing crazy. So I'm really excited for you to take a listen to this episode. Brendan is the founder of Master Talk, and he coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel called Master Talk with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. He blew my mind. I just have to be honest. So many things that I hadn't thought about and things that I now am excited to put into practice for myself. Ways to just think about the numbers of people we need to meet and how to continue to jump into that abundance mindset and know that we can be more targeted and more engaged with the folks that are in our world. I also just love how he talks about giving value because, I'm all about giving value. So I really think you're going to enjoy this episode and just kind of a way to reframe how you show up in your community and how you being the best person that you know you are and providing value all the time, how that can play into some of the networking things that you do. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by our office hours. Digital marketing therapy sessions are 30-minute sessions that are here for you to do whatever you need, to have me in your pocket to talk through your email marketing strategy, to talk through your ideal donor list, whatever it is that you need support with to hit your goals. You can head on over to thefirstclick.net/office hours to grab that time slot and let's talk and let's make things happen so you're hitting your goals in 2022. Let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business. Hey, everybody, please join me in welcoming Brendan to the podcast. Brendan, thank you so much for joining today.
Hey, of course, Sammy. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so people, I think we hear all the time, I'm terrible at public speaking or I'm terrible at networking. Before we kind of jump into some of the tactics today, like what do you say to people when they just assume they're just bad at it, so they're just not going to do it?
Yeah, I don't blame them for it, Sammy, because a lot of communication and public speaking is littered in negativity. Like the first word that comes to mind when we think of communication is not dream, it's fear. It's anxiety, it's stress. So what I always like to say, I always respond with the question. And the question is simply this: how would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator? A lot of us dream about our vacations that we want to go on, the expensive things we want to get, whether it's the Ferraris or the Bugattis or the whatever you want to call it. But a lot of us don't dream about our communication. So the best place to start is there.
Do you think that people don't dream about their communication because they just don't know how good it could be? Like they can't even fathom like a life with good communication, not fearing public speaking, not fearing walking up to a stranger to have a conversation. They've just never even seen how amazing that can be.
I feel that's a big piece to that. Absolutely, Sammy. And the other piece to that is we've just been taught communication the wrong way. Let me give you an analogy to help us understand this. Let's say we played basketball as kids. Okay, just random example. And every time you missed a basket, someone would throw a basketball at your head. Would you grow up liking basketball?
Right.
No, right? But in the context of communication, that's literally what we're doing with our children right now. Because every presentation we gave in school where we learned how to speak was mandatory. It was never, hey, Sam, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Like, nobody says that. The second piece is all of those presentations were different. It was never, what do you like, Sam? Do you like books? Do you like podcasts? And Brian, what do you like? Do you like communication? No, it's like, you got to talk about Shakespeare. And then the 10-year-old is confused. They're like, what's Shakespeare?
Right.
And then the third piece is every presentation is tied to a punishment. So if you don't do a great job, you don't get a clap. You get a
That's
slap in the
great.
head and 30%, yeah, off your mark.
That is a really interesting way to think about it. That makes so much sense. But we are talking about this today because from the context of networking events and in person and how to have kind of that confidence. Because I think whether you show up and you do public speaking or you show up and you're presenting yourself in a professional setting, they're kind of similar tool sets, right? Like how do we present ourselves and our business with confidence? And so what kind of would be the biggest mistake that you see people making when they show up to an in-person networking event to kind of make connections for their business?
Absolutely, Sammy. So let's go from a principle here. I would say the biggest mistake, whether it's in an in-person setting or just general networking, is we don't overinvest in our winners. Let me explain what I mean, because my thought process is a little bit different than other guests you might have had on. So here's the perspective I always like to take, Sam. Let's say we meet somebody new every few days, which is something that's very rare. Most of us don't. So in a year, give or take, we'll meet 100 people. Makes sense so far? Pretty simple.
Yep.
And let's say you live 50 more years than the age that we're at currently. So let's say you're 30 and you live 50 more years until, let's say, 80, as an example. If you multiply it, and don't worry, this is the only math exam today. If we multiply 50 years by 100 people, the answer is 5,000. Whereas I think a lot of people, when we think about networking, we go, oh my God, how do I get everyone to like me at this event or at this setting? Versus going, who do I want these 5,000 people to be? Out
Yeah.
of the billion, right? Go ahead, jump in.
No, I just love what you're saying. Carry
Oh,
on.
no, you're good. No, feel free to jump in. But yeah, absolutely, right? Out of the billions of people that are in existence, maybe 2 billion of them speak English, and then out of them, we can only shake 5,000 hands. So if we look at that game, networking as a game from that perspective, our mindset around networking changes, which leads to the following conclusion. The biggest mistake that people are making with their network is they don't rank their best relationships. Who are the people that you already like? Who are the people that pour into you? And when was the last time you did something for them? And for most of us, the answer is nothing. So what you need to do is you need to figure out the people you like. Like, for example, we have good chemistry. That's just random. We don't get to choose that. It's just energy. And sometimes you get on a show and it's just like, oh my God, I can't do this. and then, right, take those 5 people and have them introduce you to the best people in their network. And you can network out of your closet and do really great.
I think that's really interesting, and I've never heard anybody describe it that way. Because then that takes all the fear out of it. Because now you're not necessarily trying to just go after cold people. You're going after the people you already know who are going to introduce you to somebody you already know, which we do in sales all the time. But that's a really interesting way to figure out how to open it up. And I love that 5,000 people. Who do you want those people to be? Because that also plays into like who's your ideal person. Like we're not trying to cast the net to everybody, right? We're trying to target the people that we know are the right fits for us. So could you talk a little bit more about how you might prepare then to go to a networking event so that you can come in with that confidence of like, I know who I'm talking to, or I know what I'm doing here, or I feel okay.
100%. So now going with that frame, excellent, Sammy. Now it's about thinking about which event are we choosing. So that's the first problem we got to solve for. And for me, my perspective in life is always simple. Great people always lead to great business. Always. Yeah. So if you have great friends, you want friendships, you have those friendships, you got relationships all over the globe, you'll be fine. Somebody will get you business. Yep. So now it's with that frame. So I'm not a big fan of going into the event and going, I need to talk to these 2-3 people. For me, it's more about pick the right container and just let life work itself out, but talk to as many people. Mm-hmm. So in the context of this, what I always like to start the conversation with is start thinking about what are you personally excited about? What are you passionate about? What are the questions you like answering? And what groups of people have those same values and have that same curiosity that you do. So in my case, for me, the best networking environment by far, besides podcast hosts, which is always fun to have a conversation and just riff, is personal development conferences. Going to Tony Robbins events, going to Lewis Howes events, going to these kumbaya events where everyone's trying to improve themselves. I love that shit. So I'm always talking to people at the meaning of their life, and I find out one of them is like the CEO of a $1 billion company, and I just get a sale. But the sale is never
Not
direct. It's
the part of the
always,
conversation, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's not what you go into the conversation with. Kind of going back to your point of when was the last time you did something for someone else in your network?
Absolutely. Exactly. So for me, it's all about, like, for me, communication and networking is a lot like dating. You have to date a lot of people. And honestly, if I look at the top 10, I call it the value list, where you rank your relationships not based on money or fame or status, but just simply based on how much they pour into you. That's the metric for me, is how generous is somebody. And what I realized when I looked at my top 10 and I thought about the first impression I had of them, I never would have expected we'd be friends this long or that we'd have a super amazing relationship. So these things can't really be guessed or thought of and said. Like, we've seen this all the time where people are perfect for each other on paper, whether it's in love or in relationships, and then they meet each other and it just doesn't work. And you
Yeah.
don't know why. And then, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
think that's so true. But what about so I guess what you're saying is when you go to a networking event, kind of like what you said, don't necessarily have your targeted list. So you are just kind of the mind frame of like coming in with the questions that I think I can have to get to know somebody and then just talk to as many people as possible so that I can find out who the right people are to continue that conversation with, not necessarily coming in with my business pitch ready to like sit down and throw it down and have a conversation about it.
Absolutely, Sammy. And another way of rephrasing what you said, which is absolutely true, is a lot of people make that mistake. They go into networking cocktails, they give people their business cards, and they expect that's going to get them something, versus going, who are my favorite people at this event, and how can I overinvest in my favorite people? I'll give an example that's more tangible. I was at a networking event in October. It was like a grand for a day. It was like 30 executives in Montreal. Montreal's where I'm from in Canada. So I just said, you know what? Might as well just drop the money and see who shows up because there's never any events in Montreal. So I go to the event, and honest to God, I didn't like 29 of them out of the
You
30.
knew? Oh wow.
No, I just talked to them. I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. But the one person out of that 30 is like my best friend now. So for that person who has like this big beard, he's the CEO of this physical therapy company. He's like 27 years old, super successful, and we just hit it off. And at the end, I just followed up with that one person. I think maybe two, one and somebody else. And then we got dinner and we became best friends. So the goal here is not going, how do I get to like everyone, but rather going, who's the person that's meant for me? And if I can get one of those people at every cocktail, that's a massive win because that one relationship is going to open so many doors for you.
Well, it kind of is that ripple down effect, right? It just takes one person. And to go back to what you said at the beginning, who are the people that I want to pour my energy into so that they can pour their energy back into me? You can't do that with hundreds of people. So if we do that with the select one person who's then going to introduce me to three, maybe three business opportunities, who then might introduce me to three more, I mean, then it just starts to kind of ripple from there.
Oh yeah, 100%. And you might have said this on another show as well. The whole idea of behind Dunbar's principle, where you can only maintain ties with like 150 people all at the same time. So even the 5,000 rule is very overstated. The truth is it's probably 500 or even less. So given that, what this does is it changes our frame of mind, Sammy, where we get less anxious about trying to make every relationship work. It's kind of like marriage, right? You don't need to marry 7 people to have a
Right.
family and to have a beautiful life. It's just a lot of people get stressed out, right? Including me, by the way. But when we realize that, okay, we're optimizing for one person. So it's okay if we need to let go of most people. It's okay. It's not about treating them rudely or going, you're not in my life anymore, but rather just going like, okay, like just don't follow up with them versus the people that are really meant for you. But then every 50 people, every 70 people, if you're willing to go through all the dates, you're willing to have all those conversations, you'll find somebody who's like a business partner and you'll just ask yourself 3 minutes into the conversation, do I know this person? Feels like I've known this person for like 7 years, and those are the people you keep in touch with and you triple down, which most people don't do.
So talk to me about how we fight that urge when we're at an event and we've met somebody for the first time and they say, "Oh, hey, what do you do? Where are you from?" How do we fight that urge to kind of word vomit everything and our sales pitch and turn it into just maybe a brief overview and kind of maybe flip that conversation more into getting to know the person?
100%. So the way I always think about Dale Carnegie, oh, I messed that up. Dale Carnegie says it best, right, Sammy, in the sense of the people who are the most interesting are the ones who take interest in others relative to themselves. So people love to talk about themselves. I mean, that's why I love being a guest. I just love talking about myself all the time. So when we talk about ourselves, it increases the level of interest in the other person. So if we spend 30 minutes listening to somebody, at the end, they just go, well, I want to know about you. It creates this mystery. And the way that I've always seen it is since we only get to keep a relationship with 100, 150 people, remember that you're vetting them, not the other way around. So you don't want to go quickly into your business pitch and your sales pitch because it might not even be a great customer for you. Maybe they're not even worth your time. The most important thing is getting to know them, getting to know their vision. So when people ask me that question, what do you do? Literally, Sammy, what I do, which is totally bad in the context of this conversation because I'm a podcast guest, so I have to talk and add value. But if this was outside of the setting, I would literally respond with, yeah, I'm a communication coach and I make YouTube videos on communicating. What about you, Sam? I'd love to hear more about you. And I would just start asking you questions and then listen to your response, and that's how the conversation would flow. Because if you don't like the person you're speaking to, I mean, you're awesome, but let's say in a cocktail, you just skip them. If you listen to them for 5-10 minutes and you're like, geez, like I want to shoot myself, then just move on to the next person without talking about yourself.
Well, because let's say you spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes with that person at an event, that's 15, 30 minutes you're not talking to somebody who could be a better fit for you.
Absolutely.
So don't waste your time. I love that reframe of going into the conversation saying, I'm vetting you, because I think that does take the pressure off too. Like, I'm not here trying to make this sale or convince you that you need to, give to my organization. I'm here trying to learn more about you to know if you're the right fit. Like, that just is such a mind flip.
Oh, 100%. And I'll admit, by the way, it's not something I had early in the business. As you can tell, I'm not the oldest dog in the yard in my space. I started coaching C-level executives. C-level, for those who are listening, just means CEOs, when I was like 23 years old. So I had that scarcity mindset at the beginning because a lot of people would say no because of my age. So I would go up to every cocktail like, please, old white man, please hire me for your coaching and for my coaching. And they would all say no. And it would never work when I would try to hard sell them. But then when I realized that it only took 10, 20, 30 raving fans to really build a successful coaching business, which is what I have now, I realized I don't need to be great for everybody. I need to triple down and really maximize the value on the one person who says yes to me. And that's really changed my business and my perspective, where I don't really feel the need anymore to go into a cocktail and say, oh my God, I really need to like get this person to like me or else I'm not going to eat tonight. I think it's more about saying, okay, let's set us up for success. Let's build that foundation and make sure that every human being who says yes to us, even if that person is just one person, we over deliver for them so much because time is better spent there than trying to get new fish into the net. Because that person, if you over deliver for them, they'll open the doors for you over time.
That is gold. I think that is so true. And I'm so glad that you said that. So let's talk about how like kind of the world is one giant networking event. So when I'm in line at the coffee shop, or I am at a conference, or I'm in the pickup line for my kids at school, like all of these are networking opportunities. And I know this is something I struggle with. Like there's so many things that I know I can do to help everybody. And it all just starts with a conversation, and you never know when you talk to somebody what that's going to lead to. So how do you kind of become one of those people who can just strike up a conversation with a stranger and just kind of see what happens and go from there?
And I'll be honest, Sam, even that's a struggle for me, even if I am a communication expert in what I do. Sometimes I'm at a coffee shop and it's hard. I was like, oh, I was talking to this girl behind me. Okay, like, hi, what do you do? They're like, why are you talking to me? So I feel it's a muscle that we build up over time. Mm-hmm. There's no silver bullet. So I'll give you an example. Is the first thing that we need to master before we get to that level of communication, which I think is tough for most of us, is to start with, are we having fun? Do we see networking as a fun thing to do? And for most of us, it's not a fun thing to do because
Right.
we haven't seen the benefits yet. Like the real benefits, not just the money and the sales, but really the lifelong friendship. Like a lot of my clients are lifelong friends. It's not just like, oh, like they give me money and I give them some magic hocus pocus and they're great communicators. No, it's like, no, we have dinner together and one of my clients is coming to Montreal and I'm meeting their family. Like, it's not, it's a really family thing. So for me, where we start the conversation with is go to the top 5 people in your network, make a list, and we rank that list not on celebrity status, not on money, but just how much they pour into you, how much they believe in you, and pour into them and have them make introductions. And when you start meeting those people, you start getting addicted to networking really quickly because you go, oh my God. Like one of my best friends, the only reason I met him, and we're business partners now, but it's more than just that, was because of one of my other friends. If he had never introduced me to Billy, if Sam hadn't introduced me to Billy, I never would have met him. Right. And then once I get that, then you get addicted to it, and then you could do the coffee shop thing. So when I'm at a conference, I'm super high energy. I'm always trying to talk to every human being, every soul that I meet, but it doesn't start there. We need to get addicted first.
So what's your quote unquote pickup line? How do you start those conversations when you're out there? Like, what do you say? Just like you introduce yourself and ask them a question, or how do you kind of spark that conversation?
100%. I would say it depends on the setting. In a conference, it's a lot easier. That's why I go to them a lot. It's also about going to the environment that you're the most comfortable in.
Yeah.
So for some people, it's going to a music concert and talking to people. For me, it's personal development, junkie events. That's my thing. I just like doing that. So my pickup line always at those events is how's the event treating you? How's the event so far? And they go, wow, it's great. And you say, tell me more about you. And they just start talking because they want to talk to you. It's not like they're rushing for Starbucks and running off to their day-to-day life. That's one piece. Another one that's very simple, but it's so simple nobody does it, is you just go to people and you say hi. Hey, I'm Brendan. What's your name? And then they go, Sammy. It's like, hey, Sammy, great to meet you. Where are you from? And then that's it.
Yeah, I think it's the nervousness creeps in, and then we feel like we're going to be awkward and weird. But I think to your point, that's true. Depending on the environment, like if I'm at a networking event or a conference or a business something, people are there to talk to people. So they might just be as shy as you are. So you're doing them a favor by walking up to them to ask them a question or ask them their name because they might be feeling just the same amount of awkwardness.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah, and we all want to have a friend at those events or somebody that we can talk to. So, but I do like what you said about flexing that muscle and then that it is a practice. And I think a lot of us are maybe a little bit out of practice because the events are just starting to ramp up. I know I just went to my first in-person conference in May, and it felt weird because I was like, I haven't practiced this conversation and how to just kind of make that initial small talk. So we talked a lot about kind of what things to do before you get there, while you're there. You mentioned follow-up. So how do we, what's your kind of best tips for follow-up at an event and kind of keeping that conversation going? And like you mentioned, you don't need to follow up with everybody, but like, do you follow the same ranking system that you use with people that you met as well?
I love your follow-up question. Yes to all of the above. So there's two pieces to that. One, I have a specific ranking list for every event that I attend. So I have my global top 10 list, which is all of my relationships with my top 10, like my business partner, family members, all that stuff. And then I have separate mini top 10 lists for different events that I attend. And what I do is I only follow up with my top 3 from every event because I go to a lot of events. And remember, we're only optimizing for a few hundred people, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really, and the only metric, and it might be a bit immature, is like, who are my favorite people? Like, that's it. Like, it's not who is going to drive the most business for me? Who's going to drive the best results? Unless it's not fun for me anymore, Sammy. So for example, think about this podcast. It doesn't really matter if I get business right. It's really just I like doing it. So that's why I like having conversations. And that's the key. Triple down on what you like. But the other piece is how do you follow up? Generally speaking, if they're in your top 3 and you like them, chances are they like you too. So there's not much crazy tactical advice here in terms of the follow-up. Like, for example, Patrick, he wanted to talk to me too. So after that event, we just had dinner the following week and we just made sure to put in the calendar. But I'm always the person who initiates, though. That's what I will say. So I think the key is just make sure that when you meet that perfect person, that you take it upon yourself to just send them that quick little text, that quick little message, say, hey, it was great meeting you. Let's jump on a Zoom call. What times work for you this week? And that's it. Simple.
And then how have you worked through, because I'm sure you've gotten some no's over the course of your career and building these relationships. So how do you not let when they come back and they're like, you know what, we're just not interested in having, future conversation, kind of like, how do you not let that no derail you?
I'll be honest, it's very rare now that I get a no if it's just the top 3, but it has happened for sure. Here's what I will say. My perspective in life, and it's taken a lot of inner work to get to this point, I'll admit, is, our goal is to, in my opinion, as human beings, is to share love with other people in the best possible way. In the best possible way. So if someone feels that they're not a match for us, if that's the way that we know we need to show love for them, which is to simply not have a conversation with them, if that's what's in the best interest for them, then perfect. Like, I'm all for it, because I want people to live their best life. But what I'll also say is, trust me, it might be painful short term, and I've definitely had those moments where I was like, man, like, they were the one for me. Like, why? but I also feel that it doesn't take a lot of people to make networking magical. So if you get all of those rejections and you get that one person who says yes and that person becomes a lifelong friend, always ask yourself, was that lifelong friend worth those 10 rejections? And the answer is yes. I'll give you a quick example. So my best friend, one of my good friends, Sam Kamani, I've never met him in person yet. He's one of my best buddies. And this is when I started guesting on podcasts, Sammy. So I didn't know it was a thing. It was like March 2020, the pandemic just hit. And I just started messaging a ton of podcast hosts, like a ton. We're talking like hundreds of people. And what happened is most of them rejected me because I was a nobody 2 years ago. And I still am, honestly. Still getting better. And I was just messaging all these people. And one of the guys who said yes, it was like 20 people that said yes out of like 400 people, was a guy named Sam. And the other 19 hosts that I had met, I had a great relationship with, but we didn't really keep in touch. And Sam was like the golden goose. He was just amazing guy, fantastic human, been friends for years. But here's the point. I had to go through 400 of these things to get to that one person. I had to go through all of that rejection. And was it worth it? 100,000% yes. So it's all about weighing in the benefit of that one relationship relative to the output. And trust me, it's always worth having the friend over the output.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, right? But what I like about what you're saying is that you control the numbers. So it's not about putting out this net and saying, I need to talk to 1,000 people and hope that 5 of them like me. It's more about, I'm going to go to this event because I know this event is right for me. I know guest podcasting is right for me. I mean, like, that's a little bit of a different numbers game, but I know that I'm going to talk to just a handful of people. And like you said, I don't want to gloss over this. Like, your no's have become much less because you're being more intentional and you're not following up with everybody. If you were following up with all 100 people you met at those events, then you would have way more no's.
Oh, 100%. And I feel what's shifted a lot in my strategy, especially when you get more leverage in your brand and you get better. Obviously, I'm not there yet, but it's definitely better than where it was 2-3 years ago. Most of my introductions now are warm intros. Yeah. So it's people in my network saying, hey, you need to talk to this person. So let me paint a different picture here, Sammy. Let's say you do the value list exercise that we talked about, right? Top 5, you introduce people and you genuinely add value. Trust me, if you're someone who's a go-giver and you're really doing that, eventually the market will speak the value that you offer. So what does that mean? Well, eventually that 5-person top amazing people becomes 20. But when you have like 20, 25 rock stars in your network who are always thinking about you, who are always helping you, my God, like, you don't have time to meet all the incredible people they start introducing you to. You just don't have the time anymore. So at this point, you just stop going to events, or you don't follow up with anybody. Like, that's why I said I only follow up with top 3. I think now it's probably 1 or 2, if I'm being honest. And then the rest is just warm intros from my network of exceptional people that I built 1% at a time over the years.
Okay, so this is a little bit off topic, but I want to touch on it just because I
Ask
think
me
we're
anything, for sure.
interested in your answer, and then we'll wrap this up because I think you've given people a lot of. I don't want to overwhelm people with all the amazing things. So, our audience is largely nonprofits and fundraisers. And so, one of the things you talk about a lot, which I think is great, is how do I add value to those, right? Top 10, top 5 people? How do I provide value? And I think as fundraisers, it becomes really easy to just always be one sided. I'm calling you to ask you to refer people to me. I'm calling you to give me money. I'm calling you to be on this committee. I'm calling you because we need something from you. So, do you have maybe some ways that fundraisers might reframe some of those either follow up conversations or ask for referrals and also provide value to them and give to them in ways they may not think about?
100%. And I'm glad you brought that up, Sammy. My recommendation, then I'll dive into why that is a book that you probably have recommended on the show before, but I'll reemphasize, called Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison's the CEO of Charity Water. It's a nonprofit he started to help people gain access to clean water. I think he's the golden standard and one of the best nonprofit executives in the world. And what I would say around Scott, and this is once again going to be counterintuitive advice, is the reason he's so good at marketing and fundraising and building relationship, him and his team, obviously, he doesn't do this on his own, is because he treats the people who raise the most money for him like they're a VIP member at some club, like some country club. And I feel what a lot of fundraisers don't get is having the empathy to understand what's important for the richest people in one's nonprofit and what are their priorities and optimizing against that. So what Scott has done is he created a separate fund that you probably also already talked about on the show called The Well. So The Well is a group of families who actually pay for all of the overhead for Charity Water so that all of the 100% of the public money goes straight to the programs. But what's interesting is how he manages the 114, 150 families. And it's a lot more than just, hey, can you give every year? But it's really about, like, they send these people gifts that are very personal. They have a whole department in Charity Water that just focus on gifts. And I would add on top of that as an easy tactic, write very detailed notes about the top 100 donors and surprise them. Find ways to add value. And the mindset that I want to leave people with, Sammy, is imagine as if they gave the money that they raised to you. Let's say they were a client of yours. Let's say they spent $100,000 on your service or something. How would you treat them differently? How differently would you treat them? And the answer would be very different. That's how you stand out.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on this podcast, is creating that experience for your donors so they're like customers as opposed to donors. I love that. Okay, so many good things and things that I'm actually going to take into effect because I have a few in-person events coming up, so I'm excited to kind of reframe this. So I've learned a lot from you today. But Brendan, if you could kind of give one last takeaway to people as they're going back out in the world and making some new connections, what would that be?
Absolutely. I always like to end with this question, Sammy, which is, how would the world change if you were an exceptional communicator? Don't just write the question down. Really reflect it, especially in the context of your audience, where we're not fundraising to have a fancier meal. Right? We're fundraising to create impact in the world, to create more transformation in people's lives. What would that look like at scale? What if we all banded together and made ourselves exceptional? How much more money would we be able to raise? How much more impact and lives would be able to save? And we start to visualize that exercise together. That's what creates the burning desire to say, you know what? Sammy and Brendan are right. I should make my value list and start adding value because these children need me to do that. And that's what creates the motivation to get the job done. So I encourage people to reflect on that question.
That is a great way to end it. Brendan, if people want to know more about you, how do they find out about you and continue?
Yeah, absolutely, Sammy. Great conversation, by the way. I love your energy. This is great. So,
Okay.
two easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And then the second way is for those of you who are interested in coaching, just sign up for one of my free trainings that I do over Zoom on communication every few weeks. And the website for that is rockstarcommunicator.com.
I love that URL. That's a great one.
Yeah, we got lucky.
Yeah, I love it when that happens. And we'll link up all of this and some of the resources that we talked about at thefirstclick.net/157. So you can get all of the links there in case you're listening to this on the road. Brendan, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation.
Likewise, Sammy. Thanks for having me.
Big, big, big thank you to Brendan. I'm really curious about what your big takeaway is and what you're excited about doing when it comes to attending your next in person event. How are you going to turn these tools into action and really make things happen for your organization? Um, I just think the whole mindset piece for me and showing up and really just asking questions and finding out who's the right fit for me is going to be a game changer in how I show up and talk to people, pulling that fear away, right? It's not about me. I'm trying to find the right fit for me, not sell myself. So that was my biggest takeaway. I can't wait to hear yours. You can email those to me at sammy@thefirstclick.net. For now, subscribe wherever you listen. I'd love it if you'd give us a little review and make sure you check us out on YouTube, firstclick.net/YouTube. But I hope you have a great week and I'll see you in the next one.